part of the supplies that the ancient Egyptians believed a pharaoh would need in the afterlife. The antechamber contained over 600 objects. Carter and his team had to clear the antechamber before they could explore the other rooms. Each object was numbered, described on an index card, and photographed. But this task was difficult because the antechamber was so crowded that it was hard to move one object without risking damaging another one. It took 7 weeks just to record and clear these objects. Then each item had to be wrapped in cotton padding. It's estimated that wrapping up the treasure from the antechamber alone took 1 mile of cotton. The items then had to be carried out of the tomb with great care. Each item was tied with bandages to a padded wooden stretcher. Then they were carried under guard to a nearby tomb. Large items, such as the animal couches and chariots, they had to be taken in pieces and then reassembled later. Each time an object was carried out, it caused such excitement among the crowd of newspaper reporters and tourists who waited constantly outside the tomb. Carter persuaded the Egyptian government to let him use a remote tomb as a laboratory and a storage area. And the tomb was at the far end of the valley, and it was sheltered from the sun, and it was banned to tourists. At the storage tomb, objects like this one were cleaned of surface dust and measured, and further notes were taken. And all the information was put on filing cards. And this index card that you're looking at is actually a photo of Carter's notes on the Guardian statue. Today, the Griffith Institute of Oxford University houses all of these index cards and photographs, and they have graciously allowed me to use these images without charge. So thanks to them. Unfortunately, there is no photograph of the photographer himself, Harry Burton. He was so busy taking pictures of the tomb, but no picture was ever taken of him, so I can't show you what he looked like. It seems counterintuitive, but the tomb itself was very humid. And so there were problems when wooden objects were removed and exposed to the dry desert air. The wood shrank and separated. This Guardian statue shows the problem of shrinking wood. There are cracks where the headcloth and the collar of the gilded plaster have started to separate from the wooden body. Carter treated wooden objects with melted paraffin wax. This worked for a while, but the problem continues today. Other materials, such as cloth, leather, and the strings holding necklaces together, they had rotted away in the tomb, and they could not be saved. Most urgent work was done in the Valley of the Kings. Long-term work took place at the Cairo Museum. To make the trip to Cairo, objects were placed in cotton wool and then packed into crates. These were loaded onto a railway. This was a series of flat wagons that had to be pushed by hand along the tracks. Each 5-mile journey across the desert into the Nile River took 15 hours, usually in the blistering sun. Then the treasures were shipped down the Nile to Cairo. You can see from this photo that robbers created chaos in the antechamber. These robberies were sometimes committed by the craftsmen who built the tombs. So perhaps Tutankhamun was robbed by the very people who helped bury him. The design on the doorway seals told Carter the break-in occurred shortly after Tutankhamun's death. Government officials tried to restore some semblance of order to the tomb, but they put many things in the wrong boxes, and their carelessness caused almost as much damage as the robbery itself. The rubble you see here at the entrance to the tomb is because the ancient officials had this passage filled with these stones to prevent further vandalism. When Carter first looked around the antechamber, he spotted a sealed door behind one of the couches. He climbed through a small hole in this door at ground level and discovered a room beyond. The room itself, called the annex, is a 3-foot drop below the antechamber. It was the smallest room in the chamber, and it was also a mess. The annex was a storeroom for oils, ointments, food, and yes, wine. There were 116 baskets of food and 30 jars of wine. But the beds and chairs and lots of other things ended up being stored here. Because of the number of objects in the annex, Carter initially could not stand on the floor. So until he could clear enough space to be able to stand, he had to start his work by leaning into the annex from the antechamber, suspended on a sling which is held up by the other team members. And then, as